This video is brought to you by SteelSeries and their extremely limited edition range of World of Warcraft 20th anniversary kit, including the Arctis Nova 7 headset, the Aerox 9 wireless mouse, a very handsome mouse mat, Horde and Alliance themed boosters for your headset, and a very sick looking artisan keycap. Stock on these is extremely limited, so get in quick and get a 12% discount while using offer code SKILLUP over at steelseries.com. More details after the video.
World of Warcraft: The War Within. Now to this point, we've never covered World of Warcraft on this channel, and I know I'm like a month late, but since I've been playing this anyway, we thought we'd do a review. I've also never talked openly about how I feel about World of Warcraft, and given I'll be doing a lot more MMO and expansion reviews in the future, it probably helps to know where I stand regarding the biggest one. This video is not just for current WoW players though. While this is a review of The War Within, I think lapsed players, or those looking to jump in for the first time, will be particularly interested in what I have to say here regarding this expansion and the current state of the game. For some context, I played a lot of vanilla WoW back in the day, but I only seriously got into the game at the launch of Legion and have kept up with every expansion since. I would consider myself a sort of WoW tourist though. At no point have I ever reached the highest level of content. I tend to just spend, a few weeks or so with everything the expansion offers, do the raid, and then dip out until the next big patch. So I went into The War Within with one question on my mind. Is this just the same old World of Warcraft? In some ways, it is, and it's those stagnant parts of the game that I find myself rather unenthusiastic about. Things like the campaign experience, quest design, and open world. So my first impression was that I fully expected to be doing a similar thing here in The War Within, hopping off the train soon after hitting the endgame. But I will say, never have I felt better served as a semi-casual player than I have here with this expansion. And in that way, I do see myself pushing further and sticking around a while longer. New features like the warband system make playing multiple characters easier than ever. The new hero talents make the prospect of trying out more of the classes quite compelling. And the new delves, I think, are one of the best activities Blizzard have ever added, allowing a solo-friendly, lower-stakes avenue for endgame gearing and practice your class. Basically, if you're under the impression that World of Warcraft is this hardcore, impenetrable MMO that you need to sacrifice your life to in order to keep up, I'm happy to tell you that isn't quite the case. In fact, modern WoW is actually a rather casual, solo-friendly experience, and it's never been more true than it is now with The War Within. Blizzard's continuing dedication to improve the accessibility of WoW, combined with the exciting new systems and abundant content in The War Within, has more or less overshadowed any grievances I had by the time I reached the endgame. As such, I find myself more eager than ever to remain invested in WoW for the long haul, rekindling a passion I haven't felt in years.
Who am I? Whoever you want to be. What happened back there? This isn't you.
Come, Valeria. Embrace who you truly are.
Now I'm going to be straight with you. The campaign did not give me the best impression of The War Within, and I was quite surprised by that. Maybe I was going in with heightened expectations because I saw the WoW community at launch mostly in praise of The War Within's campaign, but while the presentation and emotional beats of the narrative are good, the actual gameplay, pacing, and characters I found rather disappointing. Spoilers ahead, by the way. I don't think you're missing out on much if you get the story spoiled for you, but if you want to skip straight to the TLDR, then you can jump to the time on screen. The setup is thus: a bunch of the main cast are being called out to by the soul of the planet, and we end up chasing that calling to a far-off island. When we get there, though, we're ambushed by the arachnid race known as the Nerubians, led by the new big bad of this story arc, Xal'atath. Now that first zone you land into isn't nearly as striking as previous expansions. In fact, it took me a second to realize this was actually a new zone. Then the first people you meet there, the main new race, are the Earthen Dwarves. On paper, they're cool, essentially caretakers of the planet who never die because of a machine that continuously recharges them. They're programmed for specific roles in their society, and those who have broken free from their responsibilities are in contention with those who aren't. There's a cool story in there, somewhere, but their whole arc about them breaking free from the grip of their creators was kinda lost on me. We don't really learn enough about their creators in this expansion, such that we might sympathize with that goal. I also found their dry delivery, lack of memories, ambitions, or familial ties, while appropriate, just made them really difficult to connect with.
I am sorry for what has happened to your people. I understand what it feels like to watch your home slip away.
In fact, that's kind of a running theme. I found it difficult to connect with much of the characters in The War Within, as the breakneck pacing made it difficult to latch onto any of it. Take Anduin's story, for instance. He's kind of absent until about halfway through when he comes to tell us he's found an entire civilization of ancient humans just living here inside the planet who worship this giant crystal they call Beladar that flips between this light and dark side. Honestly, that's pretty sick. Completely changes the atmosphere of the zone. In fact, this might be one of my favorite zones in the entire game, but I digress. Anduin is sad because he believes he can no longer wield the light due to events that transpired back in Shadowlands. Through his new ancient human friend, though, he realizes that maybe he doesn't need the light. So that's quite interesting development for a devout paladin such as himself. Oh wait, never mind. He gets his light back a couple hours later, all is well. How about Illyria? She's upset about Xal'atath blowing up our city, so goes on a reckless rampage to hunt her down solo. Apparently learning nothing from the last elf that tried to do this similar thing in Shadowlands. This near 3 millennia old elf is also constantly falling for Xal'atath's bait, at one point firing a shot at yet another one of her illusions, while in open view of the entire spider army in the middle of our secret insurrection. In the end, she does end up thinking with her head over her heart, but most of this storyline is like crammed in with Anduin's at the back half of the campaign, so it doesn't quite get the time it needs, leading to these many unearned monologues of introspection.
Can you blame me for wishing I had prevented it? For wondering if the Void could have alerted me to Xal'atath?
No, I understand that feeling.
Then there's Xal'atath herself, who is also, like, honestly, kind of a weak villain so far. She kind of just shows up, says some cryptic stuff, refuses to elaborate, leaves. She does this, no joke, like 4 times throughout the story, and having finished it, I still don't have the foggiest idea about what her deal is. She gestures at the fact that she's been pitting each of these civilizations against each other to feed off the chaos or something, and that our crusade against her has furthered that. But that never seems to be acknowledged by any of the characters, so I'm not exactly sure if she's just being figurative. Some might argue that mystery makes her intimidating, and sure, maybe in the future that pays off, but at the moment it just feels like baseless taunting. Same goes for the secondary villain, the Spider Queen. Her being under Xal'atath's influence isn't super intriguing because it turns out she's just another power-hungry tyrant anyway, and her story seems to be over before it really begun. And all this gets really lost in the sauce when you consider the many other side tangents that pad out this campaign. From helping these rat people overthrow their king, to this cult that worships the dark side of the Beladar crystal, to these troll druids who you meet for like 5 seconds. Honestly, just too many to list here. So when people say this is the best campaign since Legion, do I agree? I mean, yeah, sure, but that's kind of a low bar. Look, the emotional through line here about finding one's own path is admittedly far more compelling than recent expansions, and it's all presented very nicely with spiffy voice acting and animation work. The music in particular is excellent. The zones look fantastic as well. There are parts of this that are a step up, but again, Blizzard tried to cram way too much within a short 8 to 10 hour campaign, such that you're not given the chance to properly digest each beat before the game shuttles you to the next one. All in all, the story isn't bad, but I was kind of hoping The War Within was going to be the expansion where I could be like, yeah, you should play WoW for the story. Unfortunately, it still falls a little short. The actual gameplay in the campaign isn't too hot either. For the most part, the questing experience falls into that trite formula of go here, collect 3 quests, zip 10 meters away to kill some stuff and click some objects, return and move on to the next area. The enemies in the open world are also just completely trivial. They fall over to half a dozen keystrokes. This extends to even the marquee boss fights in the campaign, which again seem to die before they can even finish their monologue. I get that the general combat needs to be manageable for even those new to the genre, but with mobs dying so quickly, I think it does a disservice to players trying to learn their class, since it doesn't allow them the chance to properly learn how their abilities interact. What also continues to be a bit of a problem for WoW is that despite this being the most popular MMORPG by a wide margin, you wouldn't know it by playing the open world. During the entire campaign, I rarely ever ran into or had a conversation with a single other player, just completely dead. I know I'm like a few weeks late to the expansion, but I think that says a lot about WoW's open world design. With quests so quickfire and flying now enabled from the jump, everyone's just zooming from A to B and back again without any chance or reason to interact with others. Personally, I play MMORPGs for those interactions. I mean, it's how vanilla WoW hooked me into this genre in the first place. It's a shame to see how modern WoW still presents such few opportunities for that kind of organic cooperation and socializing to occur. These things aren't exactly a deal breaker for me, but it did make that initial experience of jumping back in feel like nothing had changed. I recognize a lot of these concerns are not specific to The War Within, and nor specific to the genre. I'd aim many of these same criticisms at Final Fantasy XIV, for example, but I was nonetheless disappointed to see these problems still present here in the biggest MMORPG on the market in the year 2024, and can only hope improvements to those elements are on the table for future expansions. But that's enough doom and gloom. Thankfully, the campaign and the open world is not all there is to WoW expansions. Far from it, in fact. Much of the excitement for a new expansion comes in the form of all the endgame content and surrounding systems, and in that regard, Blizzard have risen to the occasion. I think a lot of people have this impression that WoW is still this very demanding MMORPG. I totally get where that comes from. You see the raid races taking literal weeks of progression. Every piece of footage you see has like 17 add-ons filling the screen, guides plastered everywhere about the most efficient ways to gear up. You see Reddit posts about players being unable to get into groups because they're too low item level, or playing the non-meta class, etc. And yeah, I mean, all that's still there and always will be because of how WoW has fostered a competitive community. You might be pleased to hear, though, that over the last few expansions, Blizzard have made efforts to improve World of Warcraft's approachability, to make it an MMO that's friendly to solo or casual players. And that's all come to a head here in War Within. Now, philosophically, I don't know if I like MMOs encouraging solo play. In fact, what I liked about WoW was that the best gear came from the hardest group content, and that simple pathway always gave you something to aspire to. But I can certainly recognize that not everyone has the time or energy for that, myself included, and Blizzard clearly acknowledges this too. One of their responses to that is arguably the biggest new feature in The War Within, Delves. Basically, these are bite-sized mini-dungeons with multiple difficulty tiers to work through. You can hop in alone or with friends, though they're designed to be soloable content. If you're familiar with Destiny, they're kind of like lost sectors, but with a bunch of other neat elements tacked on. First of all, you've got this dwarf bro who'll tag along. You can assign him as a healer or DPS, you can level him up and find equipment for him that'll change his capabilities, and that adds a cool layer of progression, allowing you to push into higher tiers, even if you yourself lack the gear or skill to do so. There are 12 delves, each can roll with one of 3 variants that change the objectives and gameplay gimmick. Sometimes this totally changes the way that you navigate the space. For example, there was this one, where one path had me moving toward an airship to steal some treasure, but along the way I needed to fire these flares to divert the attention of patrolling enemies. In another version though, I was shot over to start from the airship, working my way back to the entrance, disarming traps as I went, without the benefit of those flares. Combine this with random modifiers that stack up in higher tiers, and there's a surprising amount of variety here to keep runs feeling fresh and engaging. My initial worry was that these might have become tiresome if you were encouraged to farm them ad nauseum, and that maybe they'd even draw players away from doing group content. But since the best rewards come from special highlighted ones that rotate each day, and they can only be properly looted a limited number of times each week, that isn't a problem. They also scale to any number of players up to the max party size. So if you've got just 1 or 2 buddies on and you need something to do together, delves are the perfect fit for that. Admittedly, said scaling is a little wonky. At launch, they were a good difficulty for solo players, but were then completely trivialized in groups, and now they've swung in the opposite direction, making it harder for groups, but likewise harder to solo, especially on the squishier classes. This continues to undergo tuning, but with 38 class specializations in the game, I'm unsure it'll ever get to the point that it's perfectly balanced for both solo and group play. Personally, I think just giving the dwarf NPC a tank role would help a great deal. Otherwise, I'm pretty happy with where delves have landed. I'm not the best WoW player, but I've been able to solo tier 8 delves, which drops the highest gear currently, at well below the recommended gear level, and it only gets easier the more I gear up. Yes, I'm playing a tank, and yes, I'm doing it very slowly, but the fact that there's no timer or pressure from other players means that I'm able to take as much time as I need, and if I need to leave the PC for a second, I can just do that. Crucially, it gives me the opportunity to properly learn the nuances of my class in a low-stakes environment. I mean, I've always wanted to learn to tank, but doing so in dungeons or raids is quite daunting, and the open world doesn't put up enough of a fight. Delves have given me the confidence to do just that. These aren't the only way the War Within facilitates solo play either. Dungeons can now also be played with NPC followers to fill in for other players. You only get basic rewards from it, but like delves, they too are a great avenue for learning in a stress-free environment, or to experience the story without being rushed through. And if you don't want to do the raid to see the final cutscene, there's now a story mode that lets you fight the final boss in a solo instance. So while I'm still not sure that solo play is the most appropriate direction for an MMORPG, I certainly welcome these changes for the long-term health of the game. Likewise, the gearing process has been really streamlined now. This is one of the things I've appreciated most about The War Within. Even though I'm not a fan of the item level grind, the abundance of avenues for gearing makes it rather painless to keep up. Those delves, for example, drop surprisingly high level items. I mean, I'm able to get gear from this completely solo that's at the level of a heroic raid or a +5 mythic dungeon, neither of which I'd have any chance of getting into right now. Combine this with world quests, faction vendors, dungeons, raids on the match-made easy difficulty, these all provide great gear without demanding a high level of play. There's even the Vault, introduced a couple expansions ago, which lets you pick from a selection of gear each week based on the content you've done, making all activities worth doing even if you don't get lucky with drops. You can convert any high-level gear into the raid gear for their set bonuses, various activities drop currency that lets you upgrade an item's gear level. It can certainly feel a bit overwhelming at first, but it's not mandatory to do all these things. They simply exist as parallel gearing paths, allowing you to engage with the parts of the game that you want to, while still getting meaningful rewards. For reference, despite being many weeks late to this expansion, in just a week and a bit of relaxed play, I already had my full raid set bonus and was high enough item level to jump into normal mode raids and Mythic Plus dungeons, an impossibility in the earlier stages of WoW's life. Put simply, The War Within marks the point where a lot of those traditional WoW barriers are mostly gone, allowing you to fully engage with all facets of the game at your own pace. The War Within is also the best state that the game's been in when it comes to playing multiple characters. Leveling extra characters is easier than ever. I mean, XP gains are insane. You literally get like 2 levels per dungeon up to the expansion, and then once you're at the expansion, you get a stacking 5% XP buff for every character you've got to max level, up to 25%. More to the point, the expansion introduced this new warband feature. This is essentially account-wide progression, so your characters now share faction reputation, achievements, transmog, and there's even now war-bound gear that can be transferred across characters. I do think Blizzard could lean into this more though. For instance, that shareable war-bound gear is kinda rare, which is a bit weird to me. I mean, I've only gotten like 4 war-bound drops so far in my 30 or so hours with the expansion. The main reason I feel so compelled to try out other classes at the moment though, is for the final new feature, hero talents. These are mostly just extra passive abilities, some with a new active ability attached, intended to deepen your class fantasy, pulling from all corners of Warcraft lore. For example, my Death Knight can spec into the Riders of the Apocalypse tree, which lets me basically do mounted combat and occasionally summon fellow Death Knight NPCs to fight alongside me. Similarly, on my Monk, I mostly played with a tree that would regularly summon celestial beasts with my attacks and granted me a sort of ultimate ability that does crazy pulsing damage, summoning all the celestials at once when fully upgraded. Thing is, at the moment, some classes get way more out of hero talents than others, pouring one out for the rogues. I'd love to see Blizzard lean harder on the visual aspects in general, like change the appearance of even more abilities to really fulfill that fantasy. But the good news is that Blizzard do seem to already be working on big revamps for this sort of thing, so there's hope yet. All in all though, I think hero talents do the job for the most part, at least for the classes I've played. They feel balanced enough that one doesn't completely overshadow the other in all content. They offer just enough unique flavor to get me interested in playing other classes. While hero talents haven't fundamentally changed how your class plays, which is a bit of a shame, I will say that some of the overhauls Blizzard have done lately have really helped cut down on the skill bloat. To any outside viewer, it probably looks like I've still got too many abilities on the screen, but honestly, a lot of those are on long cooldowns and are very situational. Nowadays, you're only using like half a dozen abilities as part of your core rotation, sometimes less, allowing you to focus far more on the encounters than your hotbar. You also no longer need add-ons to customize the UI, as that's now baked into the game as of the last expansion, which is great. This honestly makes World of Warcraft one of the easiest MMORPGs to play when it comes to moment-to-moment combat, but it still retains that extraordinarily high skill ceiling in those utility buttons and higher difficulty tiers if you want to push yourself. Despite room for improvement, all the additions made here in the War Within are great, and they make retail World of Warcraft a remarkably easy game to get into and to keep up with. Blizzard have said that they intend new systems like this to be evergreen rather than dropped in the next expansion as with previous systems, and I'm hopeful they'll stick to that commitment given the impressive groundwork laid here. So I know expansions tend to go through a honeymoon period. I mean, I enjoyed the launches of Dragonflight and Shadowlands, but we're now over a month in, and general sentiment remains very positive. I share that optimism. I mean, this is the most hooked I've been on WoW in a long while, and I don't think that'll be changing anytime soon, given how much the War Within has to offer. I mean, there's stuff I haven't even talked about, like the mini progression system where you make a pact with one of the spider leaders and completing quests grants abilities with them that help you explore the zone. I haven't done much to level each of the factions to unlock their unique cosmetics. I'm yet to go hunting for those rare mounts. I've only done a fraction of the side quests available, and I fully intend to loop back to those because they've been excellent so far. I've also only gotten like 2 classes to max, of which I'm leveling like 3 others, one of them as the new Earthen race, which I only unlocked just recently. The sheer amount of content to do here is staggering, and it's important to note how all that stuff I mentioned is optional side content. It's great to see Blizzard continue to build on that horizontal progression, since the vertical progression doesn't do a lot for me these days. Because yeah, it's still of course a little difficult to compete with players ahead of you on the item level ladder if you're wanting to push into that proper high-end content. I definitely had a hard time finding groups for certain content despite meeting the minimal gear requirements, but hey, that's just the nature of the beast. So I found a cool guild and have now almost finished the raid on normal, as well as dipped my toe into some Mythic Plus dungeons. But as much as I've enjoyed pushing myself in the endgame so far, I suspect the main reason I'll stick with WoW over the long term this time is because you no longer need to search high and low for those like-minded players, or treat the game like a job just to get the most out of the game. This has been somewhat true for a while now, but the systemic changes made by recent expansions, combined with the War Within's improvements to the solo experience, make that casual style of play more viable than ever. Does it still suck for your hard-earned gear to be worthless in the next update? Yes. Does the open world feel completely dead? Yes. Has the questing model grown a little stale? Yes. Is the story still a bit mid? Yes. Those things did make for a rather disappointing first impression of the War Within. The WoW was incapable of transformation, that I'd once again be here for a good time, not a long time.
But once I pushed past the fog and each of these new systems came into view, I came to realize that World of Warcraft has actually grown a great deal, much like its players, and while The War Within isn't solely responsible for that, it is proof positive of Blizzard's commitment to making WoW a worthwhile MMO for all. There's still work to be done, but I can confidently say that no matter what kind of player you are, there's never been a better time to enter the fold.
From time to time, SteelSeries partner up with game makers to celebrate the biggest releases of the year. They've done it a couple of times with Bungie for various Destiny drops. They did it for Diablo 4 last year, and this year they've partnered up with Blizzard again to celebrate the 20th anniversary of World of Warcraft. And my god, just look at this kit. The two stars of the show are the headset and the mouse. The headset is the Arctis Nova 7, SteelSeries' multi-award winning headset featuring premium neodymium magnetic drivers for an ultra-detailed soundscape, an AI-powered noise-cancelling mic, and up to 38 hours of battery life. The gold trim and design is just incredible. I genuinely think it's the best looking riff on the Arctis Nova series that SteelSeries have ever put out. I love it. Plus it comes with an exclusive in-game mount, which is nice. By the way, you can also change those ear cup covers because there's Horde and Alliance themed booster packs available that let you customize your headset to show off your faction pride. Let's talk about that mouse now. It's based on the Aerox 9 mouse, which is custom built for MMOs, featuring 18 programmable buttons and an incredibly comfortable ergonomic design. The WoW logo right there in the palm of your hand. Again, it looks fantastic. This one actually comes with an exclusive in-game pet as well. Very cute. That's not all though. There's also a double XL size mouse mat featuring key art from the World Soul Saga, and to cap things off, literally, there's a special artisan keycap that not only looks really nice, but also comes with an exclusive in-game mount. Like all themed SteelSeries drops, the stock on this stuff is extremely limited, and given how good all this looks, I expect it'll be more limited than most, so if you want to grab it, be sure to get in quick. Best of all, SteelSeries is hooking you up with a sweet discount. Use offer code SKILLUP over at steelseries.com to get 12% off your order. That's site-wide, including these limited edition items. That's steelseries.com and offer code SKILLUP for a no strings attached 12% discount. Best of luck getting your hands on it. Thanks SteelSeries for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.